This is something the country has almost never witnessed in modern American history. Right in the middle of a high-stakes legal proceeding, Donald Trump was taken out of the courtroom, not calmly guided out, not paused with a quiet recess, but forcefully shut down after repeatedly refusing to follow the judge's direct instructions. Court officials described the instant as tense, surreal, and unprecedented, a moment that felt unreal even to people who have seen countless dramatic hearings. Multiple courtroom observers say the warning signs appeared early. Trump arrived visibly agitated, cutting into the proceedings, muttering remarks under his breath, and openly pushing back against the court's authority. Judges are used to difficult defendants, even high-profile ones. But this was different. Trump wasn't simply venting frustration. He was testing the limits of judicial control in real time, pushing to see how far the courtroom would bend. The breaking point arrived when the judge issued a final warning. Trump ignored it. Then came another interruption. Then an even sharper confrontation. At that moment, the judge stopped the proceedings and made a decision that stunned nearly everyone in the room. Trump would be removed if he continued. Trump responded anyway, choosing defiance over compliance. Within seconds, court officers stepped forward. Gasps were heard in the gallery. Lawyers froze. Reporters looked up from their notes. The idea that a former president, someone who once commanded the executive branch, was now being handled like any other disruptive defendant sent shock waves through the courtroom. This was not symbolic. This was not political theater. This was the justice system asserting control, in the clearest way possible. Legal experts quickly flagged the significance. Courtroom removal is rare. For it to happen to a former president is almost unheard of. It signals that the judge believed Trump's behavior posed a direct threat to the integrity of the proceedings. In legal terms, that is a nuclear option, the kind of step courts prefer to avoid unless control has been lost. And here is why this moment matters so much. This was not about one outburst. This was about power, about whether Trump could still bend institutions to his will, about whether the courtroom would yield to intimidation. Did not. What happened next would ripple far beyond that room, changing the trajectory of Trump's legal battles and sending a message that no title, no status, and no political movement places someone above the court. The events that led to Donald Trump's removal were the result of weeks, no months, of tension steadily rising inside the courtroom. From the moment he entered, Trump challenged each procedural move, questioned rulings mid-hearing, and interrupted both the judge and opposing counsel repeatedly. Observers described it as unrelenting disruption. Not the normal courtroom pushback seen even with difficult defendants, but a constant effort to overwhelm the process. The immediate trigger involved a dispute over evidence and witness questioning. Trump's legal team attempted to introduce documents the judge had already ruled inadmissible. When the judge called this out, Trump reacted with disbelief and open defiance, shouting across the courtroom. Each interruption grew more intense, escalating from comments to gestures, until the judge felt compelled to act with real consequences. Court officers later explained that removal is normally a last resort, reserved for threats to safety, decorum, or the basic function of the proceedings. The judge in this case made it clear Trump's repeated defiance was obstructing the judicial process. Not only was he preventing the trial from moving forward efficiently, but his behavior risked undermining the authority of the court itself, creating a dangerous precedent if the disruption continued unchecked. Legal analysts point out that this was not only unprecedented for a former president, it is also extraordinarily rare for any defendant with a high public profile. In past high-profile cases, judges have leaned on warnings, fines, or temporary recesses to restore order. Here, repeated escalation left the judge with no alternative but to assert physical removal as the final step, protecting the integrity of the proceedings when lesser tools failed. Behind the scenes, members of Trump's team were reportedly stunned. They had assumed that his status might shield him from drastic measures. The removal became a stark reminder that in the courtroom titles do not grant immunity. The law applies equally, and the judge was clearly sending a message that defiance would not be tolerated. The incident also drew immediate interest from political analysts, who noted that Trump's conduct reflected a familiar pattern of refusing to respect institutional authority, a theme that has shaped both his political career and his post-presidency legal battles. By the time he was escorted out, the courtroom had shifted from a legal proceeding into a symbolic confrontation between the law and one man's refusal to submit. This was the tipping point. Trump had tested the limits of the judicial system. And for the first time, the system pushed back in a way the nation could clearly see, without ambiguity. Trump's removal from the courtroom didn't just make headlines. It sent shock waves through both legal and political arenas. For legal experts, it signaled the judiciary is willing to enforce rules and decorum, even against a former president. The implications are profound. No individual, no matter how powerful, is exempt from courtroom authority. This sets a precedent for handling high-profile, disruptive defendants in the future and reinforces the principle that the law applies equally to everyone, even those who once held immense power. Political fallout was immediate and intense. Republican leaders, long cautious about criticizing Trump publicly, faced a delicate balancing act. On one hand, condemning his behavior could alienate a deeply loyal MAGA base. On the other, ignoring the incident could look like condoning the undermining of judicial authority, creating tension with moderate voters and traditional conservatives. Analysts are already describing this as a defining moment in intra-party dynamics, testing loyalty versus principles in unprecedented ways. Meanwhile, media coverage exploded across all platforms. Social media rapidly amplified video clips and eyewitness accounts, with hashtags referencing Trump's courtroom removal trending nationwide. Memes and commentary fueled public debate as legal scholars, political pundits, and ordinary citizens weighed in. Many observers pointed to the symbolism. A man who once commanded the most powerful office in the world, now being physically escorted from a courtroom. It became a stark visual reminder that the presidency does not confer personal immunity from the law. Legal commentators also highlighted potential consequences for ongoing and upcoming cases. Removal sends a message to judges handling other Trump-related proceedings. Disruption and defiance will not be tolerated. Prosecutors can now move forward with confidence, knowing courts are willing to assert authority regardless of political pressure or public perception, and that courtroom control will be enforced. From a political lens, the incident reignited debate about Trump's behavior post-presidency. Critics argue it continues a pattern of refusing accountability, while supporters frame it as judicial overreach targeting a political figure. Either way, the spectacle ensures Trump's legal troubles remain front and center in public discourse, with every action dissected, debated, and amplified. By the end of the day, the courtroom removal was more than a single event. It became a cultural and political flashpoint symbolizing the tension between authority and defiance, law and personality, order and chaos. For Trump, the removal was not only humiliating, but potentially transformative for his legal trajectory and political narrative, reshaping how future hearings would unfold. Broader lesson here is clear. Trump's legal team must recalibrate. Every tactic that relied on spectacle, delay, or defiance is now far less effective. The legal system has shown it can stand up to Trump's behavior, and that precedent will shape how future proceedings unfold. For Trump, this is more than embarrassment. It is a strategic shift, one that could redefine the trajectory of his legal battles in the coming months, with less room for maneuver. This is the moment when the legal walls around Trump begin to crumble. Not slowly, but decisively, as the judiciary asserts its authority and signals that no one is above the law. Trump's courtroom removal has sent immediate and intense shock waves through Washington. Republican leaders who for years have carefully navigated the balance between supporting Trump and maintaining institutional credibility now face an impossible political dilemma. Condemn his actions and risk enraging his base, or remain silent and appear to condone a former president openly defying the judiciary. Both options carry serious consequences, and both sides of the choice create political risk. Moderate Republicans and independents are watching closely. Lawmakers in swing districts fear association with Trump could jeopardize careers, especially as public opinion increasingly frames his removal as a failure of personal accountability. Even within the MAGA wing, some advisors worry that relentless defiance could backfire, eroding long-term influence. Analysts call this a pivotal moment for intra-party dynamics, one that may determine whether Trump continues to dominate Republican politics or whether the party begins to recalibrate around legal and institutional norms. Democrats, meanwhile, see a strategic opportunity. Not only does Trump's removal underscore ongoing legal vulnerabilities, it also amplifies narratives about accountability, rule of law, and transparency. Political strategists suggest the visual of a former president removed from courtrooms could be used in campaigns to contrast institutional responsibility against perceived arrogance and lawlessness. The timing heightens stakes for upcoming elections, with Republican primaries potentially disrupted by divisions between pro-Trump loyalists and moderates concerned with legal accountability. Public opinion polls in the immediate aftermath suggest a complex reaction. While Trump retains fervent support among a core base, a broader segment of the electorate views the incident as embarrassing and concerning, raising questions about temperament and respect for democratic institutions. Washington is now grappling with how to address the legal reality of Trump's situation without igniting further political chaos, and how to manage the public impact. This political shockwave is not limited to Capitol Hill. Governors, state legislators, and international observers are analyzing how this unprecedented removal might reshape perceptions of American democracy, signaling that consequences of defiance extend beyond legal penalties to political reputations, credibility, and historical legacy. The moment Trump was removed ignited a media firestorm. News outlets replayed courtroom footage, highlighting tension, defiance, and the escort. Social media erupted. Hashtags referencing the removal trended nationwide within minutes. Memes circulated depicting Trump's stunned reaction while commentators analyzed every gesture, tone, and remark. The courtroom removal became more than a legal incident. It became a cultural spectacle dominating conversations across news, podcasts, and online communities. Supporters framed the event as evidence of a biased judicial system, reinforcing claims that Trump is the target of political persecution. Rallies and online forums saw renewed energy as followers vowed to defend him against what they described as unfair treatment. This reaction shows that even legal setbacks can be transformed into political ammunition in Trump's ecosystem, where public perception often matters as much as legal outcomes. Critics, however, interpreted the removal as a clear sign of unaccountable behavior. Analysts, legal scholars, and journalists emphasized that the moment underscores the principle that no individual is above the law, regardless of political influence or former office. Many noted that Trump's actions not only violated courtroom protocol, but also risked setting a dangerous precedent if left unchecked. The media frenzy also amplified global attention. International outlets highlighted the historic nature of the event with headlines framing the removal as a dramatic symbol of law confronting power. For many observers, the spectacle reinforces trust in institutional checks and balances, showing the judiciary can assert authority even against the nation's most powerful figures, at least in principle. The public reaction, split and intense, underscores how Trump continues to shape narratives around legality, power, and resistance, making every legal development not just a court matter, but a national conversation about leadership, accountability, and governance. Immediately after the removal, legal experts analyzed the implications. Constitutional scholars emphasized that the removal demonstrates the strength of judicial authority, even against a former president. Courtroom rules exist not just for decorum, but to ensure fair, orderly, and impartial proceedings. Trump's removal signals that repeated defiance will not be tolerated, reinforcing the principle that no defendant, regardless of profile, can obstruct justice without consequences. Criminal law analysts highlighted that this incident could influence ongoing and upcoming cases. Judges and prosecutors can cite Trump's behavior as evidence of obstruction or disregard for court orders, potentially affecting rulings, bail conditions, or sentencing in other proceedings. This also sends a warning to Trump's legal team. Future courtroom antics could carry consequences beyond public spectacle, including fines, sanctions, or more severe judicial interventions. Political legal commentators pointed out that while Trump may frame the event as partisan targeting, the removal is grounded in nonpartisan legal authority. This reinforces the notion that in the eyes of the law, a former president is treated like any other defendant when courtroom rules are broken. Analysts suggest this precedent could extend beyond Trump, shaping how courts handle disruptive high-profile defendants in the future, setting standards by example. The broader takeaway from legal experts is sobering. Trump now faces a shrinking margin of maneuver with every subsequent hearing, motion, and filing subject to heightened scrutiny. The courts have drawn a line in the sand, demonstrating that continued disruption will no longer be tolerated, and that the judicial process can and will assert control against even the most powerful figures. This courtroom removal also casts a shadow over Trump's political future. While his base remains fiercely loyal, high-profile legal incidents like this make it increasingly difficult to appeal to moderate voters and undecided constituencies. The optics of a former president being removed from a courtroom are stark. Images of defiance escorted out highlight temperament concerns and questions about respect for institutions, and those images are hard to erase. Within the Republican Party, strategists are forced to consider how loyalty to Trump may conflict with political survival. Candidates in competitive districts may feel pressure to distance themselves from Trump, particularly as legal troubles escalate. Meanwhile, the Magoing will likely double down, framing this as proof that Trump is targeted by a corrupt establishment. This tension could define party dynamics leading up to the next election cycle, with rifts between pragmatists and ideologues widening, possibly irreversibly. Even Democratic strategists recognize the significance. Trump's legal struggles, now paired with visible courtroom consequences, provide a powerful narrative around accountability, rule of law, and leadership. Campaign messaging may leverage these moments to highlight contrast between governance based on institutions versus personal defiance, and to shape voter perceptions. Ultimately, Trump's political trajectory is now intertwined with his legal battles more than ever. The courtroom is no longer just a place for legal arguments. It has become a stage where political legitimacy is contested, with each decision, each ruling, and each public spectacle shaping perceptions of his leadership and influence. The removal from the courtroom marks a turning point in Donald Trump's post-presidential saga. Legally, he can no longer rely on delay, spectacle, or intimidation. The courts have established that disruptions will be met with immediate enforcement. Politically, the spectacle has forced supporters, opponents, and party leaders to confront the reality of Trump's behavior and its consequences, and to respond publicly. Looking ahead, the legal path becomes narrower. Judges and prosecutors can proceed with cases without fearing procedural interference, meaning rulings, enforcement, and consequences are more likely to occur rapidly and without reprieve. For Trump's team, every future hearing carries higher stakes, as past actions are now part of the record and precedent, shaping how courts view behavior. Politically, the removal is likely to influence public perception, intra-party loyalty, and campaign strategies. The spectacle may reinforce his image among die-hard supporters, but simultaneously alienate moderates, independents, and undecided voters. Republican leaders will have to navigate an increasingly polarized party, balancing loyalty with the practicalities of governance and electoral survival, while media attention stays relentless. Finally, from a broader perspective, this event demonstrates that the judiciary can hold even the most powerful accountable. The removal is a visual and procedural reminder that no individual, not even a former president, is above the law. It reinforces institutional strength and offers a cautionary tale. Defiance carries consequences, and the legal system can act decisively to preserve order, authority, and the rule of law. The story is far from over, but one fact is undeniable. This courtroom moment will be remembered as a historic intersection of law, politics, and personal defiance, reshaping both Trump's future and the public's perception of presidential accountability.